Opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag. A lot of questions about quarterbacks. It's a waiting game right now. The Jets, Carr, Rodgers. What about new long-term extensions for Herbert, Burrow, Hurts, all that, and Danny Dimes? Some questions there. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. It's where most of the questions came from on today's episode. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. All right, so tons about quarterbacks here. And quarterbacks rule, we talked a lot about some quarterbacks with Lamar Jackson and Daniel Jones with the franchise tag stuff on yesterday's episode, Matt. We got more questions here, and a lot of it is based on sort of the I don't know, I guess sort of the waiting that's going on right now with teams and quarterbacks. Yeah. There was a question from Michael that says, between Lamar, Hurts, Herbert, Burrow, who signs their long-term contract first this offseason? I think the short answer to a lot of that is, well, with Lamar, it's his own situation, but the other three, they're kind of waiting to see what the other guy gets. So there might be some waiting happening there. Off the air, we talked about the New York Jets a little bit, and are they waiting on Rodgers before they try to make a move for maybe Derek Carr? Are there multiple teams waiting to hear about Rodgers or something else going on with another option before they go down the path with Derek Carr? Is Derek Carr waiting to find out what the best spot is for him? Is he going to wait for free agency to start? So there's a lot of waiting going on here in the NFL as it pertains to quarterbacks. And then there's the franchise tag stuff too with Lamar and Danny Dimes. Anthony has a question. If the G-men tag Danny Dimes, they will save nothing. If they offer a contract, then they're in bed with him. What would you do? So we've got a lot of questions about a lot of quarterbacks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know where to jump in there. You just threw a lot of information at me.
This is going to have to be a quarterback segment where we throw all of these questions together. Let's start with the Jets. Let's start with Aaron Rodgers, who's currently, I believe, in darkness on a retreat right now. Is that the plan, seemingly, for the New York Jets? Are they just waiting for Aaron Rodgers? Then after that, they go, okay, we're going to go Carr. We're going to go hard after a different veteran option, or are they going to stay in-house, draft, develop?
So I think that I'm going to get to the Jets in 1 second. But when you threw all those quarterback things at me, it kind of dawned on me. It looks like there's two hurdles, stumbling blocks, delays of why we're not seeing more action right now. One of which is Rodgers went out of town on his dark mushroom, whatever he's doing. You know, he's not around right now to make any decisions. So he's the biggest fish in the potential free agent. Well, maybe Lamar. But he's a big fish and a big domino that can't fall right now because he's not around because he's in the dark. So everyone's waiting on that, I'm sure. I think the other stumbling block hurdle to all these things, which is kind of the first conversation with the contracts, of course, that we've talked about a lot, is the Browns were kind of foolish to sign the Deshaun Watson contract. You know, everyone, including Burrow, Herbert, everyone focuses on Lamar, but I'm sure all those agents are saying, well, we want the same deal as Deshaun too, and nobody's going to do it. And so I think of the contracts that need to happen. Lamar's first, even if it's just a franchise tag. I mean, at least there will be something happening. There's not a rush on Herbert and Burrow and Hurts and those guys. And if I'm them, as you mentioned, I think the key to maximizing my earning power is being the last to sign of the three. Hey, give me $1 more than Herbert got or whatever it is. But you want to talk Jets? Because I think the Jets are the most interesting team.
Just to add to what we just talked about, and like the first domino needs to fall for the other dominoes to fall. So we might, and really with Hurts, Herbert, Burrow specifically, those can be summertime things.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Burrow's rooting for Lamar to get all those guarantees, so he can be like, cool, give me $1 more in guarantees than Lamar just got. Like, we're good.
Right.
So that's where all the waiting is going to come in. I don't think Burrow's going to worry about Herbert and Hurts because he's going to go higher than them anyway. For
Good
Herbert,
point.
it'd probably be better if he could sign a deal next offseason if he has another big year this year, and then all those other contracts happen. So the Herbert Hurts thing, they might benefit from waiting one more offseason before they sign.
That's a good point. I mean, Lamar's the only one with a deadline of those four.
Yes.
So deadlines make deals happen, whether it's a trade, a contract, whatever. So I would bet something happens with Lamar, whether it's the Ravens or not, I don't know. But I do think the Ravens, I know this isn't what they asked, but we've touched on it before. I don't want to say they're stubborn, but I think they trust their scouting. They trust their process, that they're not going to just go, oh, we'll cave in. We'll give it to. I think they have a number. You know what I mean? And whether they get there or not, that's up to Lamar, in my opinion, is my hunch.
So would you say that Lamar is the most likely to get a long-term contract done first just because there's a clock, whether it's with the Baltimore Ravens or there's a trade and he gets that deal with somebody else?
Yes. Like, I'm not sure the young pups that mentioned here get a deal done before the draft, where I have to think Lamar is elsewhere or financially set before the first pick happens on draft night. You know what I mean?
But there still is the opportunity that he's on the franchise tag and then one of those other deals happens over the course of the summer. But if I had to put money on the order of them getting signed, I'd say Lamar first, Burrow second, and he gets a huge contract this offseason, and then Herbert and Hurts are after that probably. And I don't think Herbert and Hurts would get in the neighborhood of what the other two quarterbacks get, and they might want to wait anyway for one more round, one more season. But maybe they'll wait, and maybe they'll see what those guys get, and there'll be a deal done for those guys as well.
So two nuggets that weren't part of the question, and we could get to the Jets and other teams here, Carr and all these teams. I talk about every year I go to Latrobe, St. Vincent College with the Steelers, and I'm on the air a bunch, and it's the dog days of camp and all that. And I always talk about it when we're up there. And it's something the Steelers do regularly, but I think it's super smart. And you kind of mentioned it too. Like, when camp's starting to drag and everyone's looking at each other, give TJ Watt a new contract. Give Deontay Johnson a new contract. Give Joe Burrow a new contract. The whole place lights up for like a week. Like, we've been dragging, we've been in the heat doing, it used to be 2-a-days. They don't do that stuff anymore. Let's go give someone a huge contract and light a fire under the whole place for a week. Like, that kind of stuff's smart to me.
Yeah, and everyone remembers, oh, yeah, that's what we're working toward here. Let's go.
Yeah. I could be next year, right? So I think that's interesting. And then one nugget, again, that wasn't asked of us, but people forget. I mean, Herbert, Burrow, Hurts, and Hurts was not a first-rounder, but Tua was in that draft too. Like, no one brings him up at this point. You got to make a decision on him very soon. I assume he's next year no matter what. I don't know how you could possibly get a contract done with him right now, but his name never comes up in this conversation, which I find odd.
Right, and there's fifth-year options with these first-rounders too.
Right.
Doesn't have to, so maybe that's why Hurts gets a deal first before some of these other guys. But there's fifth-year options, and those fifth-year options are cheaper in most of those cases, and probably Tua too, that'll be, cheaper to just go that route if the team wants to. So it'll be the agents calling the teams more so than the teams wanting to get a deal done, except for, I think in the case of Burrow, where get it done now because you already know it's going to be a lot, and every minute you wait, it just gets more expensive.
I was thinking that too. Like, Tua, as you kind of laid out there, perfect guy for the fifth-year option. Hopefully we want to extend you after that point. Where Burrow, it's cheaper every day. Every day you do it now is going to be cheaper. And I also think that there's no question, we all know that they want to keep him, there is some good faith here, kind of like I said about signing guys in camp. Send the right message to the organization that we're going to do this as soon as possible, where the Cardinals did it with Kyler too soon. He wasn't out of the woods yet when they gave him that huge deal. They should have waited a year. Not that they wouldn't have done it, but you can jump the gun too early. But no one's thinking, oh, I don't know about this Burrow guy. Just do it. Right.
It feels like he's been in the league longer than the other guys, but they're all from that same draft class with Herbert and Tua
and Hurts.
Hurts. Next, get deeper into the Packers and the Jets.
I want to talk Jets a little bit too.
Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr and some of those names coming up on Peacock and Williamson mailbag and some non-quarterback questions as well. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. It's midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And now is the time with the NBA season post All-Star break where things really get serious as those playoff pushes happen in the NBA. And of course, there's college basketball as well. And it's almost tourney time for that, which is there's nothing more fun, I think, to wager on than the college basketball tournaments. And of course, you can still bet on the NFL as well, future Super Bowl champions and draft props at FanDuel. And of course, my favorite thing to do at FanDuel is same game parlays. Build your own parlay. At FanDuel, you can combine your bets for that bigger payout. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. A quick reminder and a quick favor to ask of all the listeners out there, even if you don't do a lot of YouTube, go to YouTube and subscribe to the brand new Peacock and Williamson feed. We're on our brand new own channel now. It's just the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show channel. We used to be on the Locked On NFL channel on YouTube. Nothing changes with all of your audio apps and all of your podcast feeds. Just YouTube. We have our own brand new channel now. So help us out and go hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, the thumbs ups on the episodes that you watch there. And we really appreciate it. That is youtube.com/@Peacock and Williamson is where you can find our brand new YouTube channel. Aaron Rodgers. It really does feel like, and we'll see how Aaron Rodgers feels when he comes out of the cave. I don't know if it's a cave. He talked about getting, food inside of a little slot. I mean, I really want to hear more about this dark retreat and how it actually works and how dark you are and, how confined you are. I would lose my mind. I would get claustrophobic in a small room. The darkness wouldn't be so bad, but if I feel like I'm trapped in a cave, like that would be bad. If I'm just like out in the wilderness in a dark room, that would be kind of cool and unplugging. And I could see why that would be beneficial and not have any social media or gadgets around you all the time and really clear your head. And we'll see how Aaron Rodgers feels about things when he climbs out of there. The Green Bay Packers side of things, it really feels like they are doing work. And there's reports that, they're, I don't know if they want to trade Aaron Rodgers, but the way their contract is put together and it's hard for people who do contract stuff to explain it. It's an odd contract, but it's doable. There's not like some $100 million that hits the cap instantly and screws everything up. There's cap ramifications, but this deal can get done before June 1st, and Aaron Rodgers can go somewhere else. And the Green Bay Packers are at least putting together some work to make it seem like they would do this trade if that's what Aaron Rodgers wants, and they're putting work in to potentially get that done. So we could see the Jordan Love era with the Green Bay Packers. So the question becomes, if Rodgers crawls out of his cave, wants to keep playing, and he's open to a trade, and the Packers are listening to offers, and the contract stuff works for another team, the Jets seem like the most likely, but I'm sure there'll be other suitors as well.
Yeah, it's funny. You said the word Jordan Love, and I'm like, he was in that Tua draft class too. I kind of forgot about it. You were talking about
He's not up for a contract anytime soon, but this time next year, if he balls out, who knows? Maybe we're talking about him as well.
Right. And I'm sure they have a better feeling of what they have in Jordan Love. And a lot of reports have been strong. He played a little bit this past year. It looked good, whatever, But I also think Green Bay, I don't say they're done with Rodgers, but I think that has kind of run its course. And I was looking at some potential cap casualties this year, like David Bakhtiari would save them a ton of money letting him go. It might be a good reset year, move on from the Cobbs and all the Rodgers friends that have been around too long. And Bakhtiari's been a great player, but I'd rather have the 18 or 20 million at this stage with his injuries, move on from Rodgers, give Love a shot, and see where you're at.
By the way, there's plenty of teams that could use a David Bakhtiari on as well.
No question. I'm not saying he's shot or anything, but boy, the injuries, he hasn't been on the field a lot lately, and it might be a great year. Sort of like what the Chiefs did, except there's no Mahomes. Just kind of take a step back, gather up some draft picks, get a little younger, get our cap a little healthier, see what you have in Jordan Love, maybe win 7, 8, 9 games and go from there. I think that's a good move for Green Bay in general. But I do think if you're the Jets, I think it's going to be Rodgers or Carr. And the way that it's setting up with the timeline is it sounds like Carr's the consolation prize. I don't know if that's true or not. Like Rodgers is tremendous, but would you rather have Rodgers for 2 years, 3 years? Maybe that's what you're waiting on is, hey, Aaron, I love you. I think we can win the Super Bowl with you next year. But how long are you thinking about playing? Is that what you're doing in your dark cave? You're giving me 1 year, you're giving me 3. I need to know that answer before I can give up a lot of picks for you.
And are we going to do this dance again next offseason? Because clearly the Packers, even Packers fans, I think that's part of it too, is the Packers organization, Packers fans are like, I don't want to be held hostage every offseason.
Well, they went through it with Favre too. Like, I've been down this road. It's not fun. I think Green Bay just says, get what you can.
Yeah, let's go. And that's part of it too, is like, how much can the Jets give up for essentially short-term Aaron Rodgers? Even if it's MVP Aaron Rodgers, it was only 1 year, maybe 2 years max.
Right.
You giving up 2 first-round picks for that?
Like, I'm not just jumping in on the car, not signing him right this second without at least having a conversation with Rodgers once he gets out of the cave or whatever. And I don't know when that's due to happen. But I think you also, if you're the Jets, it's not a foregone conclusion that the right move is Rodgers minus a first-round pick and other stuff, I'm assuming, for a short stint as opposed to Carr on a 3 or 4 year deal and go from there, and maybe Wilson emerges too. Who knows? I think Wilson will be a Jet.
Speaking of players signing, Carr might get a bigger payday than we realize too, because there might be, it might be Jets and Panthers and Saints and who else, Team D coming after Carr, and there might be a little bit of a bidding war there because he's the first one that they can go get, and teams don't want to sit, especially the Panthers. The Panthers are sitting back. If I'm owner David Tepper and I'm looking at I'm having a meeting with my guys, I'm like, you're all fired if you do what we did last year, sit back and end up with a bad quarterback situation. So be proactive, go do something. Let's get better.
Yeah, and that seems like the nature of that owner and in building in general. They dragged their feet, didn't get Watson, and settled for a lot of not even consolation prizes.
And even desperation. Going back to they could have drafted Justin Fields, just sitting there for him, and they and they were like, let's spend a second rounder on Darnold and go through that. That kind of sent them on this trajectory. So
they just take Carr and
so then they're motivated. So then now it's like the Saints have already been obviously interested, had him in a couple of times, I think, right? Or at least had multiple conversations. He was there for multiple days, and the Jets could be involved if there's no Rodgers there. So that could get interesting with Derek Carr. Maybe he makes himself a lot more money.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's at least 2. Everyone just links the Jets and Saints to him, but I bet we could come up with 4 or 5 others. I mean, if Lamar gets traded, what about Baltimore? I know your thoughts on Daniel Jones. I mean, wouldn't you rather give Carr $40 million a year than Daniel Jones 35?
Yes.
No doubt.
I personally would. And I think most teams would. Maybe not the Giants. Maybe the Giants really like what they have there.
Maybe they want a runner.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because when we did our preseason or our look ahead off-season projections of where the quarterbacks were going to land, that's what I had. Lamar going to the New York Giants and Carr ending up in Baltimore. So Baltimore could, be that team, but obviously dominoes have to fall first, and it might have to be what we're talking about here, Rodgers and Lamar. Those dominoes, then everything else can start to settle in, and we'll see. By the way, there's reports that the New England Patriots don't see much of a difference between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, and they didn't really like the way that Mac Jones acted last season, and maybe the Las Vegas Raiders with McDaniel, who did a great job with Mac Jones as a rookie, would be interested in trading for him. So that's out there as well. So maybe that's a domino. Maybe the Patriots are involved with Carr or somebody like that.
I didn't hear that, and personally, I don't agree with it. But I also agree that Mac Jones might have a Derek Carr like ceiling, and that's not good enough. Whether you like Zappi or not, maybe the answer just isn't in the building there, and they know it. So make it sound like you love Zappi and go from there. I'm glad you brought up the Raiders, though. So let's say the Jets and Rodgers don't get married.
I thought you were going to say, the Raiders are a good match for Derek Carr. That's
I wonder how that would look.
A veteran quarterback, it could work.
Is Vegas the only other Rodgers suitor? if it's not a Jet? Like, I'm almost thinking, like, if Green Bay says we're done with Rodgers and the Jets decide we'd rather go the Carr route, where else could he land? I mean, I'm sure the Saints would love it and could max out their credit cards to no end. Or is that too expensive? Is anything too expensive for the Saints?
Yeah, I don't even know. The Saints,
Yeah.
when it comes to the cap stuff, if they could figure out Carr, I guess they could figure out Rodgers too. I don't even know anymore when it
Right.
comes to the Saints. I mean, any of those teams, the Panthers, you would have to be considered.
I can see Tepper just saying, "I want to sell a bunch of 12 jerseys," and right. Maybe that's it.
In the end, it's up to Carr, I think, or I mean, it's up to Rodgers. Rodgers will come out of his cave and be like, "Yeah, you know what? I want to go to Indianapolis. Whatever it is."
Yeah, I guess the Giants would make sense as well. I guess there's more suitors than I thought. I kind of thought it would be Jets or bust, and then maybe the Raiders. But I could see the Panthers putting a big pitch in for them, or a team like that. Maybe the Giants, would make some sense.
And real quick with the Giants, Anthony had a question here about Danny Dimes. It says, if the G-men tag Danny Dimes, they will save nothing. If they offer contract, then they're in bed with them long term. What do you do? Well, you can go back to our episode yesterday about the franchise tags and the decisions there, and we gave our thoughts. Short version for me is I let him hit free agency, and I think I let him find that there's not that much money out there for him because he's in line after all the names we've talked about so far, as far as going after him, right? And I think similarly with the Seahawks and Geno Smith, the team you're already on is the only team that's really willing to offer you a lot.
Good point.
And so that's where you're going to get the most. And for the Giants, I think they tag Saquon, and I don't think you sign a long-term deal with Daniel Jones. And if you can find a huge deal somewhere else, maybe that saves you, and then you can go after a different quarterback. That's my plan anyway for the Giants.
I like that plan. It's funny because I'm glad we talked Giants, because I've been thinking about them a lot since yesterday's episode with the franchise tags. And, should I tag Barkley? Should I tag Jones? Quarterbacks are obviously way more important than running backs. But I think I've come to a very similar conclusion to what you just said there, in that Josh Jacobs, Pollard, Saquon, they're just too good at deals. Just franchise them. It's only $10 million, like we said. It's 10.5 or whatever it is. Plus, I don't want to give running backs long-term deals anyway. They're very good players. They're in their prime. They're ideal franchise candidates. So I'm just slapping that on Saquon right now. And I don't even know if I'm talking a long-term deal with them. I might franchise you again next year and run you into the ground and send you on your way. And I would handle Jones the same way. Like, sorry, but the franchise tag is not an option anymore. But here is a contract with your name on it for X amount of dollars, and you can sign it right now, or you can hit free agency, and it may or may not be waiting for you. If we haven't signed anybody else by then, would love to have you back. Last year was great, but this is our offer. We are not negotiating. It's not come back with me when you want 10% more. The answer is no. There is a blank spot here for you to put Daniel Jones on, write your name. And if you want it, great. You might get more elsewhere. You might not. And it might not be waiting for you 2 days after free agency opens. Or Derek Carr might sign tonight. You know what I mean?
Right. And the Giants, Daboll and Shane, the GM, they have good reason to be confident in their ability.
Yes.
And I think that might embolden them to say, you weren't good till we got here, dude. So calm down. Here's a contract. This is what we think you should sign for. But really, the thing that messes this all up is there's no middle class with free agent contracts for quarterbacks in the NFL. You're either a journeyman or you're getting stupid money, and there's no in between, which is where Danny Dimes, I think, should be after one good, not amazing year for the Giants. So
yeah,
and there's no comp for what he should sign. So he's even in a weird spot. Like, where do you what is Daniel Jones' agent argue that he should what's the contract that he points to? That he says, this
can't be Watson,
right? Like maybe you go back to like the Jimmy G contract after he had like that. He traded to the Niners, had a good 6-game run, and they had no choice but to sign him, and he ended up with $30 million a year, right? And is that the situation they're in with Daniel Jones right now? Maybe that's it's really tough to find a comp for what Daniel Jones should get paid.
Yeah, and it's tough as an agent and a team to be the groundbreaker there, because the league does need a starting quarterback middle class tier. You can't go into the negotiations with the Giants and say, give me the Andy Dalton contract. I'm like, of course we'll give you the Andy Dalton contract. Like, it has to be better than that, but you can't go in there and say, I want the Deshaun Watson contract. You get laughed out of the building. So somebody has to start creating that. And that's hard to do because there's no comps, and that makes it really tough.
Next, we got questions about Eric Bieniemy, the Cowboys' needs, and how they're going to find another wide receiver to be the number 2 with CeeDee Lamb, Chargers stopping the run, and one more question about quarterbacks. This one, Matt Ryan and Colts edition next. I do want to thank everybody for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen, and make sure you subscribe up to the brand new YouTube channel, and we would really appreciate you there. We're going to be coming at you every single day, all off season long, and then back into the regular season again. That is what we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And don't forget, your team is covered on the network, no matter the sport. Okay. Last question, I swear, about quarterbacks. Genesis says, if Colts release Matt Ryan, he's a certainty. He's certainly a realistic possibility in SF, right? Well, if he wants to keep playing, like he looked pretty washed. We've thought that about some quarterbacks in the past, but I could absolutely see a scenario where Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan want to give it one more run. And what wouldn't that be a storyline of Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan getting back to the Super Bowl and winning one after what happened with the 28-3 with the Falcons? But and there's recent news that as of today, Brock Purdy is supposed to get his surgery today, Matt, and there's still swelling, so he's going to push that surgery back. So 6-month timeline starting in March. Now you're going to miss all of preseason, and so we'll see what it ends up looking like if Brock's even ready to go. And right now, the 49ers have 0 quarterbacks. Jimmy G's a free agent. But Trey Lance has not been cleared. He's pretty close, but and he should be cleared by OTAs. But right now, today, if they held a practice, they have 0 quarterbacks that can go out there and be cleared and play. So bringing in a quarterback, the 49ers absolutely will. Would they bring in Matt Ryan with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy? I don't think so. But if they aren't ready to go through the growing pains of Trey Lance and they believe in Brock, they just need a stopgap to when he's ready. I could see Matt Ryan potentially be an option for the 49ers. But Matt Ryan looked pretty washed. I don't know if he's ready to hang him up yet, if there's a good landing spot for him, but I do think he's released by the Colts. I think that's
going to happen. Yeah, they save a good buck by doing that. I agree basically with everything you said. If I'm Matt Ryan, though, I have to kind of swallow my pride a little bit and realize I'm now Joe Flacco. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the kind of contract I'm going to get. I'm hanging on at the end. I'm close to Chad Henne land. I know I had more success than Henne, but you're basically the Joe Flacco level contract, 1-year deal, mentor, backup. But that system would be good for Ryan. You get it out quick, let guys do, he could point guard it up. His mind is still sharp. He's been around the block. He's familiar with Shanahan. So I'm with you. I mean, if deep down the Niners are chuckling to themselves, Brock Purdy's a guy. I want him to be our starter. Matt, you can be his mentor, teach him the ropes, be his big brother, hold down the fort for the first month until Brock is ready, and we're going to entertain trading Lance. I mean, I think that's as good a setup as you could get if you're Ryan.
Could absolutely see that.
Yeah.
Dr. Snacky says, Troy Aikman says the Cowboys need another wide receiver. The free agent class is weaker than Peacock's knees when he sees a good margarita. Do you have any creative ideas for getting Dak a legitimate number 2? Dr. Snacky has inside information about my knees. Yes, I do love a good margarita, although this is a dry month for me right now. So
I think yesterday was National Margarita Day, by the way.
Oh, it's always National Margarita Day in the Peacock house. By the way, if you're doing margaritas, like I'm not doing the dollar margarita night. I don't want a neon green fish bowl of margarita because that's just diabetes in a bowl. I want a short, very strong margarita. I make my own. I actually have my own cocktail.
Oh, we need to do that.
Called the Pavo Real, which is a mezcal margarita, sort of adjacent drink. It's mezcal. It is elderflower liqueur, fresh squeezed lime juice, and if you want to do it fully, you go a little grapefruit bitters and a little cardamom bitters, which goes well with both the elderflower liqueur and a little smokiness of the mezcal. Fantastic cocktail. But give me a short margarita that's very strong. That's the way I like my margarita. And I also have bad knees anyway, so my right knee's always kind of weak. But to answer Dr. Snacky,
let's talk about tequila for a minute, though.
Okay.
I love a good margarita as well, but I don't want the sugars, and the big
Right.
fishbowl is awful, and it makes me sick. It's terrible. My wife loves like a jalapeno infused margarita, which is
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of fun too, a little
Mhm.
spice. But I adore tequila. It's my second favorite drink. I'm a whiskey guy deep down, but tequila, everyone's like, and I drink it neat. I mean, I pour it in a glass, sip tequila's neat. To me, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, doesn't that make you sick? Don't you have tequila stories? I'm like, folks, and I'm sure you know this, 100% agave, you can't go wrong. If it's not 100% agave, it's full of garbage and makes you throw up in college. Like that's the
Yeah.
whole key to the tequila world.
Yeah, I'm not going into the well and sipping on that. I'm not sipping
No.
on Jose Cuervo or whatever it is. You get yourself a glass of really nice tequila, same as whiskey, and
Yes.
then maybe a rock in there, and you sip on it if you like it that way, and maybe no rocks. However you like it, that's how you do it. It's definitely boost forward when it comes to any cocktail, or just sipping on it is always nice.
Right. I mean, unlike vodka or some other ones, there's two versions of tequila. There's 100% agave and there's garbage. Anyway,
Can the Cowboys get a 100% agave wide receiver to go with CeeDee Lamb, or are they screwed with this draft class and with the lack of star power in free agency?
I think they're a little bit in trouble. I don't think this is the offseason to be wide receiver needy, starting wide receiver needy. Now, I know these two names aren't inspiring, but current Cowboys, Gallup and Tolbert, I think might be better than what they showed last year. I mean, Gallup is coming off an injury. It wasn't the same. I'm betting he's a better player next year than last. Tolbert was terrible and, non-useful at all, but he could take a jump and at least be useful next year. So there's two in-house options, I think, that are sort of enticing. But if you're the Cowboys and you don't use a first round pick on a receiver, an Addison or somebody like that, you might be out of luck for short-term help.
It's a good point about Tolbert and Gallup, and they could be in a spot late first round to grab one of the speedy wide receivers in this class. And there's not a lot of stud,
Hyatt.
do it all wide receivers, but I think they could find someone with some speed, which is probably what you're looking for. Next to CeeDee Lamb there. So it's not impossible for them, and they'll find that style of receiver, or you might have to hit the trade market.
Yeah. I don't know how much money they have to go get a DeAndre Hopkins or something
Right.
like that. Probably not. And then another thing that complicates it even more, we talked about franchise tags. I don't think Dalton Schultz returns. I think Ferguson's the tight end. So you might downgrade a little bit in pass catchers in general.
Best run stoppers in free agency that the Chargers could sign. This question from me. There's a lot of good defensive tackles in free agency. You just got to pay. Can they afford to give to back up the truck for Javon Hargrave or Daron Payne or even Dalvin Tomlinson and some of those other free agents? You're going to make a little bit of money, but if you're motivated, you can find that player. And there's a lot of good ones in the draft. I love the defensive tackle, the nose tackle from Michigan. And you can find these guys in the draft, and you might be able to find them in the second round area too. So this is very doable, I think, for the Chargers. And linebackers can be had. Scheme, I think that's part of it. We saw with the Eagles, and I think the Chargers are similar, where it's not a priority to stop the run. So it might just be alter your scheme and worry about the run a little bit more on defense. That might be part of it as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers here, and I don't want to go too deep into it. But right now, they're in a bad spot cap-wise. We talked about the Herbert contract looming, but they do have a lot of contracts they can rework. I mean, I'm sure Bosa and some of those dudes. There's been talk of cutting Khalil Mack and or Keenan Allen that would free up some money. But I think this has been a Staley thing, is he is a Fangio disciple, and that defense is – the Eagles is like that as well, that we're going to play with lighter boxes. We're going to play with a too high shell. And if we give up 5.5 yards per carry, so be it. I mean, that part of it is scheme to me. But the Eagles, unlike the Chargers, have got the big body D tackles. They go and get Jordan Davis and Hargrave to make up for it, where I think the Chargers have been lacking in that department. We're going to play with smaller boxes, but we're not going to play with a lot of beef between the tackles. Well, that's a problem. And then you're at the bottom of the league 2 years in a row in run defense. But I might go the cheap route. I just mentioned the Eagles. Like, how about the two veterans they signed mid-season? Bring in Ndamukong Suh. You know what I mean? I mean, he'll give you quality snaps on early downs, guys like that. I mean, a lot of those big nose tackle-ish, D-tackle run stuffers last a long time, and you can get a lot of snaps out of them when they're 35 on the cheap.
Last one, and this could be a quick answer because the bottom line is we don't know a lot when it comes to assistant coaches in the NFL.
Yeah,
but Joey Bag of Donuts says, is LaShawn McCoy saying Eric Bieniemy didn't do anything sour grapes or legit? And it's like, I don't know. I got to defer to the guy that was in the meeting rooms with him. So if LaShawn McCoy says Eric Bieniemy wasn't leading those meetings and that he didn't show him what it would take to be an NFL head coach, I have to take his word for it. And some of the current Chiefs have said that's cap, Matt. I don't know. I have no idea. It's just all speculation on my part.
Right.
Like there's multiple reasons I think working together against Eric Bieniemy. So going and calling plays somewhere is probably a good move. But at the same time, not a lot of head coaches getting hired out of the Washington Commanders building.
That's what I was going to say too. Right. Like, you think that's going to be a top 10 offense next year with Sam Howell, or whoever
but
it is?
If it is,
right.
It is, the teams might be lining up, whether or not he's had, there's everything. There's some skeletons in Eric Bieniemy's closet, going all the way back to the Colorado days. There is, he didn't call plays. And now there's this stuff with LaShawn McCoy saying that, he wasn't really the engine that was running things. He's a running backs coach. It's a passing league. Everyone wants the guy that was either a play caller or a quarterbacks coach. Those are the offensive guys that are getting hired for the most part. So if it was any one of those things, then maybe it would be easier for Eric Bieniemy. I think it's a lot of stuff together. So, clearly if he wants to be a head coach, he needs to change something. And so I like that he's going after it. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go call plays somewhere. And so we'll see how it works out. But, let's say Sam Howell turns into something and that Washington Commanders team takes a step up. Well, I think you got to start taking Eric Bieniemy more seriously. But as far as the intricacies of what he did in the building, I don't know. So I got to defer to someone like LaShawn McCoy, who was in those meetings.
Yeah. Again, we have no way of knowing. The only evidence I have is, of course, I know who the engine in the building is, and it's Andy Reid, of course.
Oh, right.
And we know. I mean, Belichick's going to run his organization. I mean, we know these things. I'm sure he did more than just sit around doing nothing, though. I mean, he had a valuable role in a very impressive organization and offense. The only evidence we have, though, is he took a lateral move with a lesser organization to change the perception of who he is as a coach to eventually become a head guy. And he has not been short on interviews. I mean, he's had a lot of opportunity and nobody pulled the trigger on him. I don't know why. Is he not a good interview? It doesn't sound like he's a great interview.
Yep. It's just hard to answer those questions because we don't know. And we get asked a lot. It's like, oh, who's the next hot coordinator? It's like, I have no idea. You can point to offenses that are good, and say, hey, maybe someone from this team. Everybody in the Super Bowl gets a lot of interviews, right? And
sure,
coordinators get hired away from the both play callers on the Eagles got hired away.
Right. So it doesn't mean they're good hires or bad hires. We don't know.
No, and we've seen guys get hired out of the Chiefs building that fell in their face too, like Matt Nagy. So
how many Patriot assistants did not do well?
Yeah,
right.
So,
one after another, right?
You want a piece of that, but if you don't get the engine, did you really get the right guy? And that's why it's so tough in the NFL. That's why there's so many teams looking for new coaches every single year. But good luck to Eric Bieniemy in Washington. I hope this works out for him. It's going to be a fun one to follow there and watch how things go with him as the play caller. Thanks again, everybody, for all of the questions and making us your first listen. Apologies to those that we did not get to. We went a little long today. Just wanted to hit a lot of your questions because there's so many good ones out there every single week. We appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed up to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. And we'll be back tomorrow and all off season long right here, Peacock and Williamson.